All right, so I think we're going to start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on the new workplace and closing the gender gap. I was very interested in the previous session speaking about water, energy, environment, and how women are really active in this sector. So it's really great. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Ghadir Al-Khoufash. I'm the CEO of Efe Education for Employment. It's a non-profit organization established in 2006. We're part of an affiliate network. We work in Jordan, Palestine, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, with support offices in the US, Madrid, and Dubai. And very proud to have Mr. Bataine as one of our board members at Efe. So that's excellent. And of course, we've been working a lot with the US Embassy, USAID on several other projects. I'm very passionate about the gender topic. And Efe and myself consider ourselves as gender advocates. We have more than 70% of our graduates across the year have been women. And we graduated more than 18,000 youth so far since 2006. To give a landscape, before I give the floor, also we want to ask the speakers to introduce themselves. Let's do that first, and then I'll kick off. And I would like to welcome the two speakers with us on the screen online, Rasim and Ayman. Hello to you, but we're going to start with the ladies over here. We're happy to have you with us, and I kindly ask you to introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Ghadir, and it's my pleasure to be part of this conference with the American Chamber of Commerce in Jordan. My name is Khulud Saqaf. I'm the CEO of the Social Security Investment Fund. As you know, Social Security Investment Fund is the investment arm of the Social Security Corporation. It was established in 2003 with 1.6 billion JD, and now I'm very happy that we reached 12.3 billion JD. Most of our investment are locally, and it's well diversified through many portfolios within, let's say, 70% in liquid and quasi-liquid portfolio, and 25% in strategic portfolios. The risk profile is moderate to low because it's a pension fund, and we target feasible and good return projects. I have a long career with the banking and financial sector. I have more than 25 years. I worked for the Central Bank of Jordan. I started as from the scratch, and then I became I was the first lady deputy governor in Jordan from 2008 until 2012. Then I moved to the Arab Bank to be the executive vice president for risk management, for the group risk management. And then I competed for this position, and I was appointed in 2018, and for 3 years and a half now. I'm very pleased to participate. I'm very pleased to be a part of this panel with these distinguished guests, and I will leave it to my partner, next speaker. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here at the AmCham conference. I hope you can hear me. My name is Jenny Al-Zain. I am a co-founder and partner at AmCham Ventures. We are an impact fund that invests with a gender lens in Jordan. I'm obviously not from around here. I'm originally from Sweden, but I've lived in Jordan for 15 years. And prior to AmCham Ventures, I was working for a venture capital fund for 5 years here in Jordan. We invested into tech startups across the Middle East. And prior to that, I was head of asset management at one of the local investment banks here. We looked at equity, mutual funds, what have you. AmCham Ventures, we invest in companies that are committed to diversity and inclusion. We focus on SMEs, not necessarily startups per se, but SMEs that have They're existing companies that have identified an expansion opportunity and need risk capital to grow. We provide both funding as well as capacity building programs and support. We are sector agnostic. We launched last year, and yeah, I'm very excited to be here on the panel as well. So I think we need to hand over to the ones on the virtual.
Rasem, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience, please. You're on mute. Rasem, we still can't hear you. I hope you can hear us. Okay. It's not working. I'm شايفة من عندي. Okay. Rasem, will you please introduce yourself? Can you hear us, Rasem? Okay, Ayman, can you hear us?
Yes, I do.
Okay, could you please introduce yourself until we fix the issue with Rasem?
With Rasem, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on this panel. It's always a good opportunity to exchange ideas with fellow Arab citizens. So my name is Ayman Al-Rais, and I'm a Tunisian citizen, and I'm a strategic investment advisor at USAID projects called Tunisia Jobs, which stands for Jobs, Opportunities, Business Success. It's a competitive project, and we work different cross sectors. Previously, I'm actually a banker. Initially, I worked in New York for several years in different investment banks. And then in the last few years, I was the advisor of the Minister of Investment, the advisor of the Minister of Finance, and also the advisor of the Minister of Higher Education. Two main areas that they are really strong interest for me: money and investments, and training and education. And that's what I'm, mainly focusing on in the last few years. And I hand it to Rasem now.
Thank you. Rasem, can you hear us now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Sorry,
Excellent.
I couldn't hear you earlier. I hope I didn't miss much. First, I apologize that I was unable to be with you physically today for some last-minute work-related emergencies. But I'm happy that I'm with you virtually at least. Would you like me to introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm a lawyer by training and by practice. I'm the managing partner of Kamal and Associates, which is a full-service business law firm in the city of Ramallah. I co-drafted a number of laws here in Palestine. I teach at Birzeit University, not on a full-time basis. For the last 10 years, I have been teaching law. And I'm a board member of the Palestinian Electricity Regulatory Body, which is like the regulator for the electricity sector in Palestine. I'm a municipal council member of the Rawabi city, as well as of a number of companies in the West Bank. And I'm a member of the Palestinian American Chamber of Commerce, of course.
Thank you all for the introduction. Before we start, and also especially that we have guests from outside Jordan, I just want to mention a few statistics about the workplace in Jordan. So the women participation in the labor market is around 14% in Jordan, which is a very, very low percentage. The economy in Jordan produces about 23,000 jobs a year, while today we have more than 450,000 unemployed youth. So the problem is really at a large scale that we're trying to solve on different levels. Within EFE, we have produced several tracks to help mitigate that, and we therefore focus on the vocational education in particular. We think the TVET might sort of attract youth and produce jobs, create jobs in the market, but it's a more complex issue that we need to sort out. I was also very pleased hearing the previous session and how unemployment is across all of the sectors we're discussing, water, energy, and everything else. It's in the core of our discussions. But I'll start with you, Khulud, and coming from the financial sector. Actually, it has astonished me in the past to see great leaders in the financial sector, such as yourself and others leading banks today in the market, who are women, and how they are leading these huge organizations, which is considered a difficult sector in general. How do you think this has happened? Tell us a little bit more about the sector and the gender gap. And I think for us to understand the new workplace circumstances, we need to still shed light on the existing and current workplace circumstances as well. So we would like to hear from you and from your experience.
Thank you, Ghadir. And yes, unfortunately, we have a very low women participation in the labor market in Jordan, but I was fortunate to work in the financial sector where in 2019 the percentage were 36% in the banking sector, and the ratio has risen from 30% in 2004 among young employees 25 or less, who are 7.3% of total force in the banking sector. For me, I started my career maybe after 3 years at the Jordan Phosphate Company at the marketing department. Then I moved to Central Bank. It was very easy, and I think there are so many advantages in working at, as a woman, let's say, in the banking sector and in the financial sector, that makes it more attractive for women. Maybe the office hours, the ability to take vacations, for example, no late hours or working at night, and there's a stability, and the gaps within the wages is very limited, which means when you are hired, like me and, for example, my colleague, a male colleague, in case we have the same, let's say, qualifications, education, we will get the same salary. It depends, after all, on the woman or on the female herself. Sometimes it's because of the woman. For example, she doesn't have the support from the family. She has children to take care of, and so she will not accept, for example, to go to travel, to stay after works, or work extra. So then, usually, male would be promoted at this time. If we look at the top leadership of the banking sector, CEOs, there is some improvement, although less than the average of the Arab countries. It's about 7% in Arab countries, while it's 2.5% in Jordan. So we're still much lower than the Arab country in terms of leadership, but still, if we compare it to other sectors, we will find it much more better. Furthermore, in Jordan, women participation at board of directors is about 4%, while in the banking sector is about 8%. So it's in the banking sector still it's better than the other sectors, and there are 0.94 women per a board of directors. About 38% of Jordanian banks' board of directors has no female representation, but recently the Central Bank of Jordan has issued like a circular encouraging all banks to have around 20% of the board members, female board members. So this was a very positive move from the Central Bank. In 2020, women representation on board of directors was about 37%, while in the United Kingdom it's 33%, and in the United States it's 35%. At the Central Bank of Jordan, the picture is nicer. I got some numbers. So women constitute about 22 and 33% of independent board members. And with us at SSIF, I have 38% of my employees women, with 33% at the top management as a percentage. Have women reached their potentials? Definitely not, of course. I see strong progressive movement among women, but it's not widespread, and therefore more efforts and enablers are needed from everyone, and from the government, the private sector, and the top women themselves. So if you ask me, it was much easier, and I consider myself a very lucky person to work in the financial sector because it's much easier. But looking at Jordan in general, no, it's still, we have a lot of work to be done in terms of transportation, in terms of support of the family, and to enable or empower the ladies themselves to be able to take the risk. And sometimes you feel it's her own decision that she doesn't want to work. She wants to be dependent on her husband or on her family. So we don't want to blame, I think it's 50% the woman herself, and the other is the society around her.
Thank you for your input. Actually, it makes us proud hearing these statistics. At EFE in particular, 80% of our employees are women.
Yes.
About 50% of our board members are women. Almost 70% of the leadership positions at EFE are held by women. Oh. So it's a women empowerment organization. Wow. I'm happy to share this with you. Perhaps it encourages other people to move on in the same direction. I'll get back to you with perhaps some other comments related to perhaps the reasons why the financial sector is likely to be a friendly environment for women, but we'll discuss that shortly. Yes. I'll move to Rasem. I hope you can hear us. And yes. you were telling us about your experience in Palestine, changing a few laws and enabling the enabling environment for the workforce. And I hope that some of these laws were related to the gender topic and making the gender gap, decrease the gender gap. Could you tell us a little bit about the environment in this relation, in particular in Palestine, and about any particular law that might inspire us in Jordan to perhaps follow your footsteps in this regard?
I wish I had more things to inspire you than that, because there isn't much to be inspired by the legal system in Palestine with respect to gender. However, there is some progress. A new companies law has been passed actually in Palestine, and actually it will be effective in 2 weeks from today. And it has explicit language that encourages, I know encourages is kind of not strong enough, but at least it's one step, one good step. Encourages to have females at the boards of directors of companies. And that takes us back to how the landscape in general looks like in Palestine, especially during the pandemic, as we believe that the pandemic has become a magnifier of gender inequality, increasing pre-existing gaps and extending to the digital world. There are increased rates of unemployment and poverty among women, as the Palestinian non-governmental organizations network reports, bigger gender pay gap and escalated domestic violence. Actually, also the family courts are reporting more and more cases, have reported more cases of divorce, and criminal courts have reported more cases of domestic violence during the pandemic and the lockdowns, etc. Unemployment rate, according to the Palestinian Bureau of Statistics, unemployment rate for women had reached 37%, while only 20% of men are unemployed. Women are more likely to have ceased or reduced involvement in paid work in order to meet the care needs of out-of-school children, older people, and sick relatives, and to perform intensive household work. Women are dropping out of the labor force at higher rates than men as a result, which risks widening the gender pay gap. The other issue is that the general perception is that women are are expected to work in less senior positions. There is still that popular look of women as only holding clerical or secretarial jobs. Um, Both in the public and the private sectors, women have been excluded from senior positions, board of director memberships, etc. However, there are some exceptions and there are some developments. Currently, there are three women ministers in the Palestinian government, including the Minister of Health, whom, as we know, all over the world has become the most important minister during the COVID crisis. In my city of Ramallah, the governor is a woman. The governor of the Ramallah area is a woman. And a few years ago, we had a female mayor, which also is, I think, great. We are seeing more and more leading businesswomen in the private sector holding senior positions, but we're not seeing enough women as members of boards of directors. Hopefully, with the new development in the law, this will change. At our office, we around 67% of the employees are women, and most of them hold very high positions, very senior positions. So I think this is good. Yeah, basically that's it. As I said, we would like to see more and more legal developments in that field. No legal framework has been introduced to Palestine to reduce the struggle of female workers during the COVID crisis. In October 2020, the Ministry of Women Affairs launched the second generational National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security for the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. But we would like to see more. I know that in the UAE, there have been some developments, Egypt, Bahrain, to ensure equal pay for men and women performing the same work or work of equal value. I mean, in Palestine, the problem is that the law says that there shouldn't be discrimination based on gender, but there is little enforcement. I mean, the labor law specifically says that there shouldn't be discrimination based on gender or any other basis, but enforcement remains a problem.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree. It's not enough to have the law, but also the enforcement of the law is something else. And it's interesting what you were saying about the mayor and people in the municipalities holding leadership roles as being women. Maybe within Amman, the greater Amman municipality, perhaps one day we have the mayor of Amman being a woman. I'd love to see that. I'm happy to see a few faces on the streets right now of a few women running for the elections for the municipalities. Let's see where we go with that, because it's always an indicator of development in any country. It's not enough, and I'm not a big advocate for quotas for women, but I think as the beginning, perhaps it will help us reach somewhere until we have more solid backgrounds for this. Dr. Ayman, I'll ask you about Tunisia, and I've been always fascinated about the level of human rights, women's rights in Tunisia. I'm always very inspired about how progressive things are in Tunisia from the reports I read and from what we see on the news. Perhaps we will have more inspiration from Tunisia than Palestine this time. And maybe, Dr. Ayman, you can share with us some statistics, insights about the workplace in Tunisia, the unemployment rate, especially within women, and tell us a little bit more about the gender. And perhaps if you could tell us also about how I think the education system have helped establish this sort of perception among people in Tunisia to make it easier for women to participate in the workplace and to hold leadership roles. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about this very interesting subject, because Tunisia is looked as a role model in the Arab world, but it still is behind even in the African world. And I'll give you some numbers. So I'll give you the positive side and the negative side. And as there is a Japanese saying the satisfaction is the beginning of the end. So there's still some work now to be done in Tunisia, and people are pushing. But just to give the audience a little bit of a background, the head of government in Tunisia is a woman. The Minister of Finance is a woman. The Minister of Justice is a woman. 34% of the ministries are women. The mayor of Tunis, which is the the capital, is a woman. But it's not enough. I mean, because you can put people in positions, but deep down there, it's not enough. And the reason why I'm saying this, because in higher education, in the top schools, every 3 graduates, 2 of them are girls. Every 3. Okay, so this is in the top schools. This is in medicines. This is engineering. This is in the top business schools, etc. While in the workforce, only 28% are women. So why is that? So people are asking, how come you have all these educated people, but still it's the problem of the average. There is a huge problem, which is a social problem, is in many, if you go outside of Tunis and go outside of the big cities, many women don't inherit. It's just by, the father will, basically write everything in the name of his sons. And the fact that you don't have access to inheritance for many regions, it means that you have less access to finance and less access to capital, so you can work less. And this is something that we can't force people, but now there is a law that is being, discussed to force the parents to be equal with their children, which is still not the case, and this is a major thing. 28%, by the way, it's more than the Arab world. We agree, but it's less than the African countries. I mean, let alone we have let alone Sweden, since we have a panelist from Sweden or Europe. Now, just to link this to COVID, COVID actually was a positive thing for women in Tunisia. And the main reason is because many companies find out that many women became much more efficient from working from home. Because the typical case, women are bothered the early morning because they have their kids, they have to prepare the kids, they have to take them to school, etc., etc. And they're bothered at the end of the day. So they spend half of the morning thinking what they do with the kids, and they spend half of the afternoon how they do at the end of the day. While, let's say, from 7 to 10 p.m., they would be fine, and during the middle of the day, they would be fine. So what happened is actually the post-COVID, many companies, they agreed with many women. And by the way, it shouldn't be women, because you can have, male taking care of the kids. I'm just, being maybe stereotypic, but it's a reality in the Arab world. So they work hybrids. Actually, they just come once a time in the office to sign things or, to do, and everything they work. Like in accounting, for example, you don't need to go to the office. All the accountants, women actually now, most of them, they prefer working from home because they can manage their time, and they work more hours, by the way, because they work from 7 to 10 to 11, but at least they put everything on place, etc. And we can see in the statistics. I mean, COVID was bad for unemployment in Tunisia, but was worse for men than women. So even though the women are more unemployed in general, but the gap is a little bit smaller. It's still big, but it's a little smaller post-COVID, because COVID was an opportunity to change the way how doing things. And we do think in Tunisia there is a new reality. There is a new reality. We are not going to go back. People refuse to work as they used to work before. They prefer working in hybrid. Hybrid became, I mean, at a point, like I had a meeting last week, and I didn't mention that it's a physical meeting. And I show up, it's like, why you're here? They thought automatically it's an online meeting. So now you have to precise if it's a physical meeting. Tunisia is by far the main exporter of engineers and the technical staff. So before, people had to go to France. We have many people going to France, to Germany. Now they work and be based in Tunisia, and most of them, they prefer having 80% of the salary that they're getting. I mean, and most of them are women, by the way, because many engineers are women because of what I was saying in the beginning. So it was a really large, huge opportunity for women because it allowed them to be much more flexible with their time, and that's what women are asking. Just not asking to work less, is to work around some constraints. Because women are not just women, they are mothers, they are wives, and we have to take care of all these features. Um, in terms of laws in Tunisia, I think everybody knows we have the Le Code des Statuts Personnels, which is a law that was released in '58. This is thanks to Bourguiba. Bourguiba, basically the first president of Tunisia, liberated women, and you know, in Tunisia you can't have more than one wife. You can have, I mean, in terms of inheritance, you care of many things, but still we need to go beyond. So there is a new law on the board membership now. They are forcing to have equality in the boards of companies. It's still under discussion. Um, but as I said, not to take all the time, um, there are some positive things, but there is still work to done. I think post-COVID is an opportunity because of flexibility, but still there are a lot of things that needs to be improved even in Tunisia. I don't know if you have any particular question, but I just want to have a quick summary, and then I'm happy to answer typical and specific question afterward.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see how humble you are in terms of the statistics you were saying, and how you aspire to be compared to more developed countries. I think for me, I was very jealous to hear about the numbers and the number of women leaders in Tunisia, and definitely your numbers are at least double our numbers. When you speak about the problem, perhaps we share some common challenges and problems, such as the high percentage of women graduating from universities versus about half the percentage you were mentioning participating in the workforce here in Jordan, 14%, which is it's half the 28% you were mentioning. So, and how Corona and the COVID-19 crisis helped women and men, I believe, in turning into the online and what we call the online freelancing platforms, and creating other platforms that enabled people, specifically women, to contribute in the workplace. So yeah, thank you for your comments. Jenny, thank you for being with us. I just learned that Jenny speaks Arabic. She has been in Jordan for more than 10 years. So it's also great that you know the context of Jordan, and you know how to tackle these things. I'm curious to know. Khulud is suggesting you answer in Arabic, but for the sake of our audience, perhaps we will not go with that. Yes, indeed. So I wanted to ask, you said you are a Jordanian ecosystem enabler. What does that mean? And is it gender specific? Yeah. And I'd love to hear some examples from you.
Sure. I think I just want to comment a little bit before we go into that on what some of the other panelists were saying. And I think the reality is that we live in the most gender unequal region on the planet. Right? And that is, we have pockets of excellence, and we have some amazing, success stories and some inspirations. But I think what we're trying to do with AmCham Ventures, I mean, there's a lot of Arabs here. AmCham is the Arabic word for future, forward, in front. What we want to try to do is to put more women at the front. So whether that is as entrepreneurs, as business owners, in senior management, or even to getting them back into the workforce. So our work centers on trying to get this circle that we see and try to make that circle bigger and get more companies to come into that. So we are an ecosystem enabler. So what's an ecosystem, right? If you work with tech startups, everyone knows what an ecosystem is, but maybe not everyone does know what that is. So an ecosystem is this sphere around companies that helps them grow and develop. So that could be investors, it's funding, it could be incubators, accelerators, it could be service providers, and the ecosystem enabler is the one that kind of tries to come in spider web and tries to make the connection between the companies and these different components in the ecosystem. So are we gender specific? Yes, definitely we are. We focus on something called the 2X criteria and the 2X challenge. that was created by the group of G7 countries a couple of years ago, where they wanted to allocate initially $3 billion, but now it's been gone up to $15 billion towards women empowerment in emerging markets. So the companies that we support has to be one out of four things. It either has to have a female founder, or it has to have a certain percentage of women in senior management. We put that at 35%. Or it needs to have a certain number of women in the workforce. We also put that at 35%. Or a product or service that specifically caters to women. So it's a much broader lens than just saying we invest in female-led companies, right? So what we do in terms of trying to enable is that we provide funding, which is one of the main pain points for SMEs, but we also provide capacity building programs. So when it comes to investments, for instance, we provide ticket sizes between $250,000 up to $1 million. We offer different type of funding instruments that really fits and is suitable for the SMEs. We, in terms of capacity building programs, we have a lot of them are for the ecosystem. Some of them are specifically for the companies that we invest into. We have one program, for instance, that we called Master Your Numbers. Many companies, not only women-led companies, they really struggle with understanding their financial projections and putting out realistic projections. So we have a capacity building program on that. We've done 3 cohorts on that already. We launched that last year. We have a really interesting program actually talking about the wider ecosystem that's called Get On Board. And Her Excellency is actually one of our principal advisors on this, and we actually have an advisor in the audience. So Get On Board is a program that we launched that is looking to try to increase the number of women on boards. So yes, it's around 4% in Jordan. It is very, very low. So what we do is that we train women in senior management position, and we take them through a corporate governance training. And then we match them, once they've gone through the training, we match them with principal advisors so that they can have mentors from people who have been there and done that. And then we match them with SMEs so that they can serve on advisory boards and with them for a year. And then hopefully the end game is that we're trying to basically get them to come onto formal boards. So at the moment, we're in our second cohort. We've had 20 women in the first cohort, 30 women in our second, and we're hoping to look and continue to do this for the next couple of years. So that's an interesting program that we definitely do in terms of trying to get more women on that. We have one program that is also specifically for women that is called WETHPA. It's for MSMEs. It's for the smaller companies that are in the idea stage, home-based businesses, what have you. And that's a really interesting program as well. So yeah, and all in all, we do 6. I don't have to go and list all of them now. I know that we're probably short of time, but we need to focus on trying to get moving the needle on really getting more women. I don't know if I said so, but the average age of leaving the workforce in Jordan is 25 years. Right? So you go to university, you have your first job, they have their first child, and then they leave. And that's a challenge, and we have to do something about that.
I totally agree. And yeah, it's amazing what you're doing, helping women and building their capacities. And I think one answer to that is what in the previous session Ali was suggesting about education and how these things have to be paved through the years since kindergarten and be drilled in their minds so that they are ready for the whole environment and for the gender inclusion as well. Khulud, I'm going to go back to you with a follow-up point to the point we started earlier. And I don't know if you agree with me, but I think so 96% of the companies in Jordan are SMEs. SMEs, it means very small and medium size companies, sometimes 1%, sometimes 5%, and less than 10 in most of the cases. I think one topic that people don't like to speak about, which is sexual harassment at the workplace. And I think most women who don't want to join the workforce say that sexual harassment at the workplace is one of the barriers for them to access the workplace. I think in the financial sector, perhaps because it's a bigger institution, many people, and it's usually more towards the upper end of the small and towards the medium-sized companies, perhaps at least the perception is that perhaps less sexual harassment issues are going to come up out of this. So perhaps this is one of the reasons why it's more welcoming to women working in this sector. I don't know if you agree with this.
Thank you, Ghadir, and I totally agree that maybe the sexual harassment in the banking sector, yani having a 25 years experience at this sector, I think I've never heard, but very rarely I've heard about sexual harassment. And I want to go back to why is it attractive when we said, I think that it's the convenience convenient work environment. There's equal opportunity to advance to leadership also positions, minimal pay gap, and less late working hours, and less bias against married women and women with children. So all of these, I think, together with less harassment sexual cases because of all the reasons that you mentioned, I think it's a very convenient and enabling environment for women to work at. So we're very lucky, as I said, to have this. It doesn't mean that there's not discrimination. Doesn't mean that women do not suffer when they work at this sector. But it's relatively speaking, it's much more or less. And I want to also comment on what was said. Also, why about the low percentage of women participation is that most of the ladies, they go and the type or the type of study that usually they go for arts, for languages, and we have less in the technological part and the scientific part, so they don't meet the needs of the market. So we have also to educate them to relate the type of studies to what the market needs. For example, we need nurses, we need hospitality, actuarial, and maybe more technical, like polytechnics and so on. So these are also reasons for the low percentage of women participation.
And I want to ask you another question
Yes.
about before and after the COVID-19, the
Yes.
digitalization of platforms in the financing
Yes.
sector, and how this perhaps encouraged more or will encourage more women to participate in the workforce, especially
Yes.
for women.
Unfortunately, COVID-19 crisis hit women's participation in the workforce much harder, with many women being forced to take a step back from work as they had to step up at home. Hiring rates for women decreased sharply compared to men, and critical ground was lost in terms of getting more women into leadership roles, especially in the beginning of the crisis. As a result, the gender gap has widened worldwide. We're not talking only about Jordan, worldwide. And the Global Gender Gap Report of 2021 sounded a warning that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has increased the global gender gap by a generation from 99.5 years to 135.6 years. Despite this, and at the same time, the pandemic has shown that change is possible, and almost overnight we saw that remote work became the norm for many. And 2 years into the pandemic, remote jobs account for nearly 15% of all jobs on LinkedIn, for example. By 2025, an estimate of 140 million new digital jobs will be created worldwide, many of which can be done remotely. So the flexibility of online learning and remote work will open up employment opportunities for women on a global scale. Yani we're hoping, inshallah, this would happen as may look to fit work and learning into their lives instead of the other way around. We also see that women are more likely to apply to remote jobs than men. Flexibility can be game changer and a key driver for equality in workplace, as it can allow both women and men to combine work and other duties. Simple measures such as working remotely on flexible working times can make a large difference, but we have to remove bias around flexibility if we to realize its true potential and make workplaces more equal. Achieving gender equality is a complex undertaking and requires coordinated actions from all, but we have shown over the last 2 years that we can make huge change at scale when we need to, and this is one area where we really need to change.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mr. Rasim, I want to ask you, so you said the picture doesn't look so rosy in Palestine, and I say the same about our policies in Jordan regarding the gender gap. But if you were to change 1 or 2 laws, if you have the magic stick to change 1 or 2 laws in Palestine to decrease the gender gap and to perhaps improve the work environment specifically for women, what would be these perhaps 1 or 2 laws?
Actually, if it were to me, I wouldn't change laws, because laws are in place. But the problem, as I said, is in enforcement and in culture. One of the panelists said something really good, which is that COVID had, in a way, another dimension of COVID is that it had a positive impact, that many women were able to fulfill their, motherhood duties or, whatever family duties, and fulfill their work duties, having been able to work from home. So maybe one of the laws that I would change, if I were to, would be the labor law, enabling men and women, actually giving them more flexibility to work from home, to be able to fulfill all of their needs, as I said, and tasks. And that would give women the ability to be promoted and get into more senior positions, and not have their family expectations or requirements or desires prohibit them from going up in the ladder. But the main important thing, I think, is spreading the culture, raising awareness. Inheritance laws, for example, in Palestine, they are clear about giving men and women inheritance. Now, they are based on Islamic Sharia, so women get 1/2 of what men get, and we can argue about this, we can agree or disagree about it, but at least the law is there. It says that women are entitled to get inheritance when their parents die. However, it is very common, especially in villages and in rural areas, for brothers to pressure their sisters to relinquish their share in inheritance, for example. And again, this has nothing to do with the law. This has nothing to do with religion. It is a social expectation. And we see it in different communities in Palestine, again, not related to religion or to a certain area. So there needs to be spreading the culture, raising awareness. Another thing would be in the corporate culture. As I said, the law now says that boards of directors should have women among their composition. However, what I fear is that many companies, what will they do is that, okay, we have a board of 9 people, let's just put 1 woman to put a tick. We satisfied the need of the law. It is not because they believe that it is important to have women in the board. So there needs to be awareness, raising awareness that when you have women on the board of directors, you have then a different perspective. Then the woman will bring new ideas, innovative way of thinking, etc. And this will make the company a better company. It will increase profitability. It will increase the social impact of the company. So it is not We don't have to do it because the law says it. We have to do it because it is good for the company. Most people do not believe in that, unfortunately. So I would like to see 7-member, a board of 7 members, at least half women, or 6 or 7 members as women. Why do we just need to have 1 or 2 women, for example? Another very interesting thing that I would like to talk about, which is not only related to Palestine, is that in 2019, the International Bar Association, which is like the UN for the lawyers, issued a report called Us Too, Bullying and Sexual Harassment in the Legal Profession. And there are actually incredible statistics there. If you give me a minute, I'll just go through some of them. According to the report, 1 in 2 female respondents and 1 in 3 male respondents suffered from bullying and rife in legal workplaces. Sexual harassment is also common, with 1 in 3 female respondents and 1 in 14 male respondents having been sexually harassed in a work context. Those are lawyers, the legal profession, or people working at law firms. Of respondents' workplaces, 53% had policies and 22 undertook training to address bullying and sexual harassment, but more needs to be done. 75 of bullying cases and 75% of sexual harassment cases, the incident has never been reported. So targets do not report. Targets do not report due to the status of the perpetrator, fear of repercussions, and the incident being endemic to the workplace. Policies and training do not appear to be having the desired impact. Respondents at workplaces with policies and training are just as likely to be bullied or sexually harassed as those at workplaces without. Targets are leaving unsupportive workplaces. 65% of respondents who have been bullied and 37% of the respondents who have been sexually harassed left or are considering leaving their workplaces. So when you work at an organization where sexual harassment or bullying are common, it's not only bad for the individual bullied or sexually harassed, it's bad for the organization because you lose good people leave. So that's why it is critically important to have policies and to change things. My recommendations would be, as I said, to raise awareness, revise and implement policies and standards, introduce regular customized training, and these are also the recommendations of the IBA actually, increase dialogue and best practice sharing, and so on and so forth. But the most important thing is to spread the culture that there needs to be policies, there needs to be implementation, women need to be on boards of directors, women need to be given their inheritance, etc. Again, not only because we need to be nice to women, but it is because it's good for the community, it's good for the country, it's good for the organizations.
Thank you so much. This is a very important topic, sexual harassment. And the other important topic, I was invited to a round table earlier about encouraging board members, women, to participate as board members in different companies. I liked a comment one of the colleagues have mentioned. She said, there is a big difference between inviting women to the party and asking them to dance. These are 2 separate things. So we see lots of cases when women are invited to meetings, to panels, to whatever, to tick a box that a woman has been in the panel or in a meeting. But how much contribution this woman has participated in, how much she was empowered to speak up and to be listened to, I think is something else. So this is what we should focus on, not only the numbers and ticking the box, but I think the capacity of a woman to participate and contribute is also important. Dr. Ayman, could you share with us some best practices from Tunisia, especially after the COVID-19, if there were any specific, perhaps best practices that you have seen that encouraged women to participate or to remain in the jobs or perhaps to work remotely? What have you done in Tunisia that could lead the way for us and others?
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of examples. I just wanna comment on just the last statement that you made about the boards. I'm just gonna give a quick example. We have 3 state-owned banks in Tunisia. Out of 20 banks, two of them, the chairman of the board are women. And I'm a member of one of them. And I went the transition from having a woman to a man. And I can tell you as a board member, we were way better off with a woman. And for a simple reason. Um, yeah, I don't know, because maybe she was like particularly good, or because she's a woman. I don't know. You never know. It's because of the gender of the skill. But we basically had very smooth meetings where she called us on anything. She knew exactly what bothers every person. She write down everything, and she calls us a week before taking any decision. And the new guy has nothing to do with us. It's all fights, 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 fights during the board meeting. So I think the fact that women could be not just board members, they should be president of board members, because they have the faculty to basically reach out to people and say, okay, I know that this subject is a little bit delicate for you. I want to discuss it before you. I found it hard for some men to do it. Maybe it's pride, ego, whatever you want to call it. But the experience, I'm not talking about reports. I'm talking about something that I lived, and we're still struggling with it. Actually, we went to the Ministry of Finance and asked them to get a woman now, because there's a woman that looking for. So just to close that parenthesis, and to tell you that they are. Now, back to your question regarding the best practices. As I earlier said, I mean, the best practice, it wasn't even an option. It was imposed by COVID, because during the lockdown, people had to work online. I mean, we're not talking about like the typical worker. We are talking here about graduates, about people who have management roles. We're not talking about the farmers. We are not, because you can do farming online. So we're still not talking about the majority of population, but let's say talking about the office jobs, etc. And what we discovered is that the more you give time flexibility, the more we have efficiencies at work. And as I gave you the example earlier, um, many women took advantage of the flexibility, and not the online work. And I'm talking about the flexibility. They still work more and they work harder because they're committed. They still wake up early and they want to do work, but there are some slots of the day they just can work, and they keep thinking about their family, their kids, etc. Early morning, late of the day. So the best practice that we found is we doing, like, so most of the companies that we have in the portfolio, we have about 800 companies in the portfolios. Most of the companies, what they do is they have this hybrid system where they come actually only one time a week, and the system works. It's not like we did the old work in a digital way. It's a restructuring of the whole work. It's now much more based on deliverables. It's much more, it's like, listen, get this to me for this in the week. I don't care when you're going to do it. You do it at midnight, at 12 o'clock, at 10, as long as it gets done. And this is actually, I don't think there is a way back. I mean, everybody is happy with this. The company has people more efficient and happier. The women, I don't want to always say so, but mostly women actually are happy because they have flexible time. They spend more times with their kids. Before was a mess for women when their kid is sick and they can't go to school. It was a mess. They have to call their moms. If their moms are alive, they have to find babysitter if it's available. Now you just send an email. Listen, my kid is sick. I can go to school. I'm gonna work from home, and everybody is happy with that, and everybody understands that. This is huge, huge change. And honestly, in the old days, if the woman comes and she knows that her son or her daughter is sick, she spends half of the day thinking about the daughter or the son, anyways. So what's the efficiency? So better be next to it. So I would say, to answer your question, the best practice is the hybrid. The hybrid model is basically now installed. It's adopted by most of the companies. You can't go 100% online, because at the end we're still Mediterranean. We like to see each other. We need to solve things physically. We can't just go online. Like I saw companies who have been online for 2 years. That's too much. But the hybrid model is working, and I think it's the new area. There is no way coming back. I saw some people like Sid Albani writing a book from Harvard on the new way of work, and and I agree with her. I mean, it's basically there is no way to come back. There is a new reality, and I think it's beneficial for women. It's beneficial for the humanity. By the way, it's not only for women.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman. The last question at this panel to Jenny. Is there a promising future, you think, especially after COVID-19, to women, striving to establish their own businesses or perhaps contribute or participate in the workforce? How do you see it?
I think this is a great time for women to start their business and to grow it. I think this whole change in the way that we work, and I think what some of the other panelists were saying, there's no turning back. This has been a complete mindset change in terms of how we use technology in life and in work. There is no going back. Technology is now comfortably in our comfort zone. I think if we look at the difference between before and after COVID, there's a lot of businesses now that are putting e-commerce. We had one of the programs that we're doing, we had a session on digital tools. We did a survey. 97% of the participants have an Instagram account, and they sell through Instagram. So, tech-enabled and getting those companies to be tech-enabled is definitely the way forward. There was a survey by Ipsos where they said in Jordan, after the COVID outbreak, 35% of people were more likely to shop through online channels. So this is a great time for businesses to come in, and not, definitely they have to be tech-enabled. And I think for women in Jordan and in the region, there's so much support that is available now. My partner and co-founder, her mother was an entrepreneur and had her own business in Jordan, back in the day. And she's like, if I had access to all of these type of programs at that time, imagine what I could have done. So I think this is the best time to start and run and operate a business as a woman.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I want to thank all the speakers and ask the audience for any questions that we can attend to. There's a question over there.
My voice is high.
Oh, wow. And if you could ask us who the question is addressed to.
So hello, good evening. First of all, I'm a son for a working mom, a husband for an entrepreneur wife with a small startup, just to make sure that everyone gets me right for what I will say. Thank you so much, esteemed
Jordanian?
panelists. No, I'm Egyptian, based in Dubai.
Okay.
So I thank you everyone from the esteemed panelists on this very interesting discussions. It's a comment followed with a question. I like the enthusiasm about the percentages of women in the leadership, but unfortunately sometimes the numbers are not representing the actual diversity that we want to bring to the table. With some organizations, from my very humble experience, I saw that if you are putting women because they are women on the board, just because they are that, you are creating, unfortunately, sometimes more bias with men, that she was promoted because she was a woman, right? And I also hate, my mother is in the board of an educational institute in Egypt, and she and I myself hate when someone says that she's on the board as a woman, not as a, I will say, high talented caliber, right? Or a qualified and fully equipped caliber. So unfortunately, some of the organizations are only taking the numbers, absolute, as target, versus taking the actual in-process measures. So solving the I would say, percentage outcome figure, not solving the actual issue, which is unfortunately conscious, and some cases, unfortunately unconscious biases towards female empowerment in leadership. The question is for all the esteemed panelists, if you have like 1 minute to comment, how do you think the whole society, also male, can change this conscious and unconscious bias in the in-process measures? I hear flexibility of working time, but I believe that there is lots of more inputs that could be there, other than flexibility, that we can achieve actual inclusion to dance. So diversity is invited to the party, but inclusion is invited to dance. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment and question. I'll start with my own comments and then open it for my colleagues if you want to comment on that. I fully agree with you, and I said earlier that I'm not with the quota type of seats that are assigned for women, and she only gets there because it's a quota, and she has to be there anyways. It has to be, from my perspective, it has to be based on competition, on qualifications, on capacity, and all of that. So I fully agree with you. The way forward, I'm a believer in the education reform. We have to start from the KG, just like what have been always covered earlier. When you speak about changing mentalities, about energy consumption, recycling, environment, TVET, women participation, all of that, it has to start from the KGs. And this is what other countries in Europe and the US and others are doing, because you have to start as early as possible. At EFE, for example, we're working with youth starting 18 years old. It's a bit difficult. They are already with a specific mindset of whether they can or cannot access the job market. We still, of course, we don't give up. Like, we work with them, and we want to change the culture, and we want to change the mindsets. But what I'm saying is that it's much, much easier when you start much earlier through the education system itself. I will leave it also to my colleagues if they want to comment on this question. Okay, I think we can catch up later, perhaps in a coffee break or something. But I would want to thank everyone. Thank you so much, and it was such a pleasure.